Welcome to Therapy, Tech, and Takeout, where humor meets healing with bite-sized chunks of wisdom. I am Toni Teixeira. I am a therapist, entrepreneur, recovering overthinker, and ethics nerd, and I'm joined by Jackie Toll.
Hi, I'm Jackie Toll. I'm also an entrepreneur. I am an unapologetic spreadsheet addict and a low-rent stand-up comedian. How you doing today, Toni? What you been vibing on this week?
Doing okay. This week, just really thinking about how big my to-do list is. And I noticed myself really trying to stay grounded, and I'm personally having some challenges around that. So this week's been kind of hard for me. Just just keeping it together.
Yeah.
Yeah, I've had to use all my tools. I'm having one of those weeks where I'm trying to ground myself. I'm trying to take deep breaths. And so kind of having a weird having a week this week. And to top it all off, I'm in New Jersey. I had snow flurries today. And it's,
That's
it's
wild.
like early November and it feels really weird. So I guess things are just kind of weird over
It's a
here.
topsy-turvy kind of week over there.
Yeah, but the highlight of my week is hanging with you. So
Yay, likewise. I'm so excited. I think we have an interesting topic to get into this week. And
well, before you get to that, what's happening in your week? I'm looking at this beautiful wrap that you're wearing. I want to find out about that.
Thank you.
How are you doing?
It's actually yarn from New Jersey, from a little knit shop in Westfield that I had stopped at when my mom, she was going through chemotherapy for a while, many years ago.
Mm-hmm.
And I wanted to get her a little, she loves to knit. And so I was like, here's something, I went and got you a pattern and stuff. And I didn't intend for her to give it back to me when she finished. But thankfully I picked colors that I like. So she gave it back to me when she was done. And I love it. And it's the perfect amount of just a little bit more warmth. On these chilly days. Even down here in Florida, it's chilly today. But
Yeah.
I would say the thing this week I got into a TV show and I really, really enjoyed it. But I have to give you a warning. It's a lot of male nudity.
What show is that? Thanks for
called,
the warning.
Unexpected. It's called Minx, but the storyline is and the acting and it's just so well done. But it's about this woman who wants to publish this feminist magazine in the early 70s, but her nobody is interested, but she finds this guy who's a pornography publisher, and he was one of their eyes on New Girl, and he's great. So, but anyway, he's interested kind of in her more than anything else, as from her perspective and stuff. But he wants to do, what he's doing with women, with men, for women and stuff. And so it's just this interesting, where she's kind of trying to figure out how she feels about all of these competing things and stuff, and get her footing in an era, right, where that's when women weren't allowed to have checking accounts without a man's signature and stuff.
Yeah.
Which is
When
bananas.
did Playgirl start? I mean, Playgirl was I remember Burt Reynolds, I think, was in the first or, the very beginning.
Yeah.
Appeared in Playgirl magazine. So I don't know, probably not the 70s. Maybe it was a little bit later, but that's a really interesting topic.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a really cool storyline, but the full frontal male nudity, just because it's nudity of they have women too, but it's just jarring kind of, because they're just walking around naked everywhere. So I definitely disclaim it when I tell people, because I'm don't put it on if you have people around that would affect
little children. Yeah. I'm not going to recommend it to other people.
Or random people might walk in or whatever. Even though there's nothing, it is just a storyline. It just happens to have this. So anyway, I thought there are 2 or 3 seasons. Anyway, I binged them all this week. They were so good.
Very cool.
And so that was, it was a little weird, little out of my normal things I would say I'm watching on TV, but really, really good.
Right. So speaking of watching people.
Right. Definitely. Nice tie-in, Toni.
What a nice segue. We're talking about this week, right?
Yeah, so the university, what was the university? It was a school in Sydney, University of Technology, Sydney. basically put out a study that related to how people responded to being watched, and specifically around their perception of faces. And I thought, like, the thing that they did was kind of cool. Like, so it was called breaking continuous flash suppression. And one eye sees like colorful noise, and then the other eye gets a face or another object that kind of becomes gradually more and more visible. And basically, they looked at the difference in the time it took for people to say, I recognize a face, when they were being surveilled by 4 cameras versus when they weren't. And they found like a second increase, a full second increase in the people that were being watched. And those people didn't report any like added like feeling of stress or anything like that. And they also didn't have like, it wasn't like they were just jumpier to recognize things, like, because they didn't have recognition, or, they didn't like falsely trigger for the non-face items. So kind of interesting, and interesting how facial recognition and like sort of how this part of our brain is actually tied to some neurodivergent conditions, right? I think, what were you saying earlier?
Well, yeah, people with schizophrenia and some mental illnesses can be preoccupied with faces, because which kind of like fits in with this particular study, because they're already predisposed to think people are watching, especially paranoid schizophrenia. So they're thinking they're being surveilled all the time. And they're usually quicker to pick up faces. And that's kind of what this study speaks to, is when we're being watched, are we more likely to notice, to recognize faces? And I thought it was interesting. They did a direct gaze versus averted gaze of pictures. And even if there was no like eye contact there, people picked up those faces just as quickly. And a second is so significant, because this stuff is
so long.
Such tiny increments that's actually a really big difference. It might not sound like a big difference, but it is.
Yeah, no, like when you're looking at those like timed things, I don't know, my kids did like this like cup stacking thing in school and stuff, and like a second is like a huge amount of time, in these worlds. So really, really interesting, significant difference.
Mm-hmm.
How do you think that feeling might impact people? Like, I know this study was just like undergraduate students.
Yeah.
But like in a wider world, maybe folks with social anxiety or other types of like maybe autism or things like that. Like, how do you think this like sort of impact that surveillance has on perception might impact those kinds of folks?
Yeah, so like just some background. I mean, in general, we are predisposed to notice faces anyway, because it's part of survival, given that layer. So noting that prosocial behaviors are higher when we're being watched. And so when there's a lot of people around, we're more likely to do that. There's also interesting research that's like, we look to see what other people are doing in environments too. And I was thinking about that in terms of this research, because they're talking about noticing faces, and we do a lot more when people are around. We also notice their behavior. And there have been some research studies that looked at, like, if you put somebody alone in a room and smoke ends up going in the room, if there's one person in the room, they'll go to get help and they'll say something. If there's a bunch of people in the room, they usually do this with Confederates. So really there's one subject and there's like 20 Confederates. That means those are the people who are not the subjects. They're like in on the experiment.
Yeah.
And none of them get up when they see the smoke. That participant looks around, and what ends up happening is we think that somebody else is going to do it, or it diffuses responsibility. This comes from the case of Kitty Genovese when she was raped and murdered in New York. I think it was Queens, can't remember. People heard stuff going on and nobody called for help because everybody thinks everyone else is doing it. So I'm sharing all of this because this is profound in terms of what happens when people are together. What do we notice and what we're looking at? We're looking at behavior, we're looking at faces, and now this other layer of when we notice we're being watched, how do we act? We usually act really good. Like if you notice, probably there's a camera watching you while you're driving, you're going to stop at that light. So I think there's a lot of implications for this. Now that I laid that groundwork, of course, I forgot your question.
No, but
Would
I
you mind
think,
sharing that? Because I think that's all important information as we talk
yeah.
about this.
No, I think that that was a really, like, interesting and important layer to add to that. It made me immediately think of, did you ever see that show Jury Duty?
Yes.
Where, like, everybody was in on it and the one guy, it was, like, all the emotions. So anyway, that, like, that came to mind because when I was thinking of those situations. But no, I was just wondering what, this increase in perception, especially like facial perception, might have on folks, with social anxiety or autism or things like that.
Yes, thank you, thank you. Perfect. Yeah, I mean, if you have social anxiety, then being around people is anxiety provoking. So if you're being watched, you're going to have probably another layer of anxiety because some of that social anxiety too is about being watched. They're,
Yeah, I would imagine.
what are people thinking about me? What might end up happening for some of those folks is as we're surrounded more by surveillance technology, which it's amazing how surveilled we are, how people even get away with anything because there's cameras where you don't know there's cameras, right? And they always have footage of somebody doing, whatever crime
Yeah,
in the craziest of places. It could create more isolation for people who have anxiety
yeah,
about being watched. I imagine too, I mean, if I take this, like, I don't know, I don't have any data on it, I'm kind of making it up, but if you think about it, being watched for someone who has some social anxiety is anxiety provoking, and that causes them to see more faces. That whole experience could add even another layer of anxiety because then people are more noticeable.
yeah, for sure.
Mhm.
And I
Yeah.
think it's interesting too that, like, the study got into, like, or no, it wasn't the study. I was thinking about how this might apply in different scenarios, right? And one of the ones that I like was healthcare and how, this might impact, like, there are times where, like, that surveillance technology is super helpful and necessary, but, like, it has a huge impact on, the patient, in those settings. I know that we had a friend who entered into hospice and they had, like, a fall camera or like a fall detector. It was a camera
Yeah.
and they're like, it doesn't see anything other than, like, shadows or movement. But it was still a really uncomfortable feeling for somebody who's already in a different space, going through a lot. And so I remember thinking, like, I get why it's there. And that it's also, like, hard, to add another thing to be hard on somebody in this time on too. I remember having, like, really complex, like, feelings about it at the time. But I think it's,
Yeah.
it's important. I don't think people are really thinking about what's on the other side of these things necessarily, or looking at how does this impact, like, neuroatypical people,
Yeah.
in things like that. So I think that that's
Mhm.
definitely something that, should get some more attention. Or
Yeah.
maybe it's happening and I'm just unaware, but
Yeah.
I think it's definitely important to be thinking about.
Well, so yeah, we're talking about a couple different pieces. One is like the role of surveillance in our world and how we might feel exposed.
Yeah, for
That's
sure.
definitely one piece of the issue. And to weigh out the safety features, like, yeah, it is great that somebody has a camera somewhere who can catch someone who's, committed a crime and you're able to do something about it before, during, or, after and catch them. But then the trade off is that we're being surveilled all the time. And I think that has an impact on our mental health if
Yeah.
we feel like we're being watched all the time, just in general, and that we don't have a sense of privacy. And then social presence through this study has an impact, and it's a significant impact. That 1 second is a significant impact, can alter our attention and where we put our attention,
Right.
which is really interesting as well, that, where it changes what we see in the world. So it's having an impact on our cognition,
Yeah.
unbeknownst to us.
Right. Right.
Yeah, which feels a little kind of like, when things are happening out of our awareness, it feels a little manipulative. It
Yeah.
feels a little, I think of how they don't have subliminal messages anymore in commercials. They're not allowed to do that because they found when they flashed that, yeah, this is way back. You remember this,
Right.
the study, you probably learned about it in college. they splashed the Coca-Cola
Yeah,
sizzling bubble thing, people got up and got more Coke, and that was a Coca-Cola, even though it was like, a millisecond, your brain picks it up through
for
your eyes, your
sure.
brain picks it up, and then it affects behavior. And we're really talking about the same thing. So if we, don't want subliminal messages on our TV and in our movies, well, here's a technology that is having an effect in a similar kind of way,
Right.
affecting our behavior, what we see in our cognition. Being the ethics nerd that I am, it's like I'm really worried about what does that mean and where our choices and all of that and the impact that it has on our nervous system.
For sure. And I think even on the other side of that, are we getting what we like? Are we getting the other side of the trade off, right? Because in theory, you have all this information, and especially when you're talking about like traffic, like things, there's cameras everywhere on the road, and stuff. But yet, there's still, it just happened up in like just north of me this weekend and just south of me too, like fatal crashes because of police chases. One in Ybor killed 11 people, like, or
Oh
I
my
mean, it
God.
was like massive. Um, and
Wow.
like, I don't know if you saw the episode of John Oliver where they talked about the
Yes.
police chases, but like we have the technology where it makes it not necessary, but yet we're not like using it to make it not necessary. We're still engaging in these really dangerous behaviors. So we're getting like the negatives on both sides of the equation with some of this, I think. So, that's the
Yeah.
other thing that it makes me think of is like, how can we be more vigilant about making sure that if we're going to be surveilled, we're at least using that to push for, other
Yeah.
things that make us safer, for
Yeah, I mean,
sure.
you're talking about the other end. We've been talking about how it feels to be, how it impacts us, our mental health, our cognition, how we show up in the world. Now you're talking about the other really important piece, which is what happens to the people who are watching the surveillance end of it. And I did see that John Oliver episode about the police chases and the surveillance, and it's astounding that sometimes that information you hope would be used in a positive way, and it's not. It's used to make really rash,
Yeah,
scary decisions instead of people holding off and saying, "Okay, wait, I have this and I can, I have a license plate number. I can find that person."
right. I can go, yeah, at a much less stressful time and situation. So yeah, I think it's just something, that there is like this buildup of like, and I think people felt it like during COVID too, when employers started to implement things like mouse trackers and
Yeah,
things like
that's
that.
right.
We're getting more accustomed to having new levels of surveillance kind of put on us, and then like we
Hmm.
fight back for, or there's like a little bit of pushback, and then it just kind of becomes normal. And I think we've seen that happen in just a bunch of different spaces, and so I guess, like, how do we set boundaries around this? Like, should we be like intentionally creating spaces where there's not this technology?
It's a really
Probably.
big question because a lot of it we don't have control
Yeah.
over, private businesses that are going to put cameras up, municipalities that are going to, kind of do surveillance for the roads and for cars and traffic, stoplights and things like that. So there's a lot that's outside of
Right.
our, I guess it starts with considering what are we doing inside of our homes
Yeah.
and what our connection is to that kind of technology in our house. Like we have cameras around the house. I have cameras in rooms. And when we have dog sitters, we let them know, hey, listen, we have cameras. Here's where they are. They're there
Yeah.
because when we're away, we like to know what the pets are doing and what's going on. I have a son with autism, so I have a camera in his room because he likes to hang out in his room sometime, and I want to make sure that he's safe and that he's okay.
Right.
So, what's our relationship to the cameras, and how do we use them in our own house? And whether or not we have them as a conscious decision instead of, okay, everybody's doing it. I might as well do this. And I'm going to watch video of everybody in my house 24/7, but making conscious choices about how we want to do that. I think that impacts then our relationship to that stuff outside of our house.
Yeah, for sure.
Hmm.
I
Yeah.
think,
How about do
yeah.
you? Are you like, where are you in that? Like, do you have cameras? Like, we have a Ring camera and we have like a camera outside the house too.
Yeah,
What do you,
I mean, I've had like we don't have a Ring camera now, but I've like lived in places that do in the past, and like I did get like a camera for my dog, and then we've got like another couple that like I don't usually have plugged in, but like if we're like leaving town or whatever, sometimes I'll plug them in. But I used to have one in my apartment in New Jersey just because like it was like my apartment with all my stuff, but like a lot of other people used it. Um because it was like a corporate apartment technically. So I had a camera there in the living room to know like who was there and like what was going on because I had all my stuff. Um
yeah,
and
that's understandable.
yeah. I didn't have it like I just had it in the living room. But yeah, I mean I think the other thing that really weirds me out too is like how often like they find cameras like I just not that long ago. I remember reading an article where they found them in plane bathrooms.
Yeah, I
Like
remember something
just
about
you
that.
know what I mean?
Yeah.
There's a small they could be like anywhere now. So there is kind of like whenever you're in like an unfamiliar space, like I kind of always have like a little bit of that feeling of like I wonder where the cameras are.
I
Like,
wonder who's watching me.
yeah, and that's kind of a weird feeling. I don't work in like a corporate office anymore, but I think I'd be like conscious of that there too if there were cameras. Yeah, I don't ever remember being conscious of it in the past, but I don't know, maybe now it would be just because maybe they're everywhere, so maybe you're looking for them.
You're
My
looking for them, yeah. Looking for that little black, it's like, right? That
yeah,
looks usually like a little black globe or something on the ceiling.
when my parents were selling a house a while back, the realtors actually put like fake security cameras.
Really?
And yeah, and
Yeah.
I just like cracked me up because that was always like something that my grandma did, like fake security signs and things like that. Like,
Yeah.
because like those are like almost as effective as the real thing as a deterrent,
Yeah.
perspective. But it was really funny to see like physical fake cameras that even had like a little blinking light. Like, why
That's
not
really
just
funny.
put a real camera at that point?
Yeah,
They're so
because that
cheap,
seems like a lot of trouble that you have to plug this thing in so it
right?
lights up or put a battery in it. Yeah.
Yeah, but it just made me
We're
laugh.
really talking about weighing out the effect that, surveillance has on us,
Yeah,
the good and the bad of it. And just like most technology, there's pros and there's cons
yeah, for
to
sure.
dealing it. We give up some of our freedom,
Yep.
by being monitored and watched. Part of me errs on the side of in a society where we can make an agreement that we all want to be safe, that feels like an okay thing to do if everyone feels that we're in agreement of that. But I'm not sure we live in that
No, I don't.
place where
Well, I don't think we live in a place where everyone agrees on anything these days.
yeah.
But
Yeah.
it is. I think that it is important, and I think also, another part of it that's helpful is if there's, if we can maybe put some rules as communities around like notification and things like that, like that people need to be like aware and notified when they're in areas of high surveillance or things like that.
I think that's fair.
Yeah,
I
like
think
I think
that's more than fair.
consent is important, and like
Right.
I think I think that would go a long way in being helpful and maybe
Right.
easing some of the anxiety.
Right. There's something very different behind being surveilled when you don't know it versus when you know it. Like I said, we have cameras for the dogs, and I tell people, "Hey,
Oh,
this
yeah,
is where they are. This is what they're for." Because I'd feel terrible if somebody thought, "Oh, they didn't tell me. I noticed this camera. Are they watching me?" And there's more questions that go along with it that feel really uncomfortable. So I think
for
honesty
sure.
about where those are,
Yeah,
but we don't see that. It's like you walk into maybe an art gallery, there's no sign that says, "You're being surveilled right now."
right. Yeah. So no, it's interesting. I think it's something that we need to be aware of and having conversations around more because it's I think becoming more and more prevalent in our lives these days.
Yeah.
What do you recommend, or especially since you've been in your toolbox of grounding this week, for times where we do kind of notice that anxiety, that the stress of this kind of stuff creeping up, what do you recommend to help people recenter and deal with deal with?
Yeah. Well, the first thing is to really check your thoughts. So, the first thing that came to mind was that people might tell themselves stories about being watched, and that's negative, and what's going to happen with that video, and to really check that. They could be they're called cognitive distortions. That's when we take a thought and we might blow it up, we might catastrophize, or kind of twist it in a certain way. A lot of people do the catastrophizing things, like, I'm being recorded. This is so terrible, and bad things are going to happen now. And to really check those thoughts. And once you check those thoughts and notice them, oh, I'm catastrophizing right now, then you can use your tools. It's harder to use your tools to ground if you're not realizing what you're doing. So one of them is like, there's the kind of 5, 4, 3, 2, 1 technique, which is like, notice 5 things in your environment. Notice making this up. I don't, you can do it with anything. 4 things I smell, 3 things I hear, 2 things I can touch,
Something you can
whatever.
taste. Yeah.
Taste. 1 thing I could taste, right? Like take a sip of water or something like that. Thank you. Or even just naming things. You could name 5 movies that I've seen in the past, 4 songs that I like, 3 people that I like, 2 colors. You can do the same. You can kind of do the same thing. You don't even have to use the things in your environment. And what that does is just bring you back to the present and to notice that you're safe, you're okay, nothing bad is happening in this moment.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's always
Good
a good
question.
reminder.
Really, really good one. Using it this week.
Yeah, definitely. I'm like, oh, I
Mhm.
know that one. Yes. Always end on taste.
Yeah. I
Because
mean,
if you
look, when our
start on taste, it's very hard.
to-do list gets really, really big, I mean, this is a tip for, when your to-do list is just like, feels like it's out of control, and your brain is running a mile and, 10 miles an hour, 100 miles an hour. You want to bring yourself back, because you're not going to be able to tackle that to-do list if you're running on empty. And the same thing, you're not going to be able to make really good choices about what it is you want to do, or even stay present in an environment like there's surveillance going on. You might be so distracted by it that you're not enjoying what's happening with the people that you care about, that you might
For
be
sure.
visiting a museum with, or, a restaurant with. So while these are things that we can't control. We can't control where, I guess we can. We don't have to leave our house, but I don't want that for people, right?
Right.
But if you're going to be out in the community, you can't control that a restaurant is recording you, but you want to have the best experience. So we do really need to find ways to be able to still live our lives.
Yeah.
Right. And have some enjoyment, even while all the stuff that's not really in our control is going on.
Yeah.
Kind of my
absolutely.
message for the day.
I think it's a great message for the day. I think it's one, especially as we head into this sort of busier time of year, usually for a lot of folks.
Yeah.
It's really important to kind of remind ourselves to continually check in and make sure that we're able to enjoy all the good things that are happening.
Stay grounded. Yep.
Yeah, absolutely.
Thank you, my friend.
Well, thank you so much for your time today, Toni. I love it. It was a highlight of my week as well. Don't forget to like and subscribe to our episodes, and feel free to shoot us an email, therapytechandtakeout@gmail.com. Awesome. Talk to you guys next week.
Bye.
Bye-bye.